Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury. I'm Suze Shaner, and I've been part of this congregation for 20 years. I raised my daughter, Nikki, in this faith tradition. And when I met my partner, Dan, he brought his boys, Sam and Luke, here as well. I've done many sermons, been on the board, various committees, taught RE, taught yoga and meditation, and helped with the Dorothy Day Soup Kitchen. So there's lots to do here. I see our faith serving a great purpose in leading needed social change in these times. I'm so glad that you're able to join us this morning, both online and in person. Our weekly services are more than just a gathering of our physical bodies. It's the forming of a sacred time that we make together for 199 years, 200 upcoming, as we work to build a more just world. And in that sense of sacredness, along with deep respect, we acknowledge that our physical building is on the traditional land of the Paugussett people. And if you're new and joining us online, we invite you to introduce yourselves and where you're connecting from in the chat box as you're comfortable. If you're new here in person, please fill out a guest card in the foyer and drop it in the basket there as you leave today. After our service, we invite those of you visiting in person to stay inside and take a moment to greet those here today. And those of you at home to participate in a breakout group for individual connections, bless you, and deeper check-ins. So we welcome you. Whatever the faith and traditions of your past, whatever your theological stance, whatever your heritage, whoever you are and whomever you love, we welcome you. You can learn more about UUCD on our website and Facebook page. And we encourage you to share our Facebook page and reach out to others who may feel isolated and might benefit from the spiritual connection with our loving community. Our announcements today are we welcome Reverend Fred L. Hammond as our service presenter. Reverend Fred, as we call him, currently serves the Manatee Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Bradenton, Florida, as developmental minister. He received his Master of Divinity from Meadville Lombard Theological College in Chicago and was ordained by our congregation, this very congregation. His Master of Science is in Counselor Education from Western Connecticut State University. He was the co-founder and executive director of the Interfaith AIDS Ministry in Danbury. He writes poetry, short stories, enjoys photographing nature, and tracing his genealogical roots. One of his poems was published in the Skinner Hour book, The Spirit That Moves, edited by Reverend Barbara Child. Again, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury, where we welcome all in a spirit of compassion, inquiry, and service. Please join us for our hymn of welcome, number 38, Morning is Broken.
Before I begin, I wanted to say how good it is to be home, even if it is virtually via Zoom. I'm also thrilled that you have called Reverend Dr. Kathleen Rudolph as your consulting minister. As some of you might be aware, she and I went to seminary together, and I was then and continue to be a big fan of her ministry. I am excited for all of the wonderful things you will co-create with Reverend Kathleen for this spiritual community and for the entire Danbury region. This morning's opening reading is Praying by Mary Oliver. It doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot or a few small stones. Just pay attention and then patch a few words together. And don't try to make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but the doorway into thanks and a silence in which another voice may speak.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome, Reverend Fred. We're so happy that you've joined us. It's now time for our Chalice Lighting, and if you could join me in our shared words of affirmation, which will very shortly appear on our screen. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and justice is its light. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek and speak the truth in love, to help one another and celebrate life. I'd now like to invite Michelle Cousins up. Unfortunately, Sierra Marie could not be here with us today, so she's going to come and do our children's affirmation and our time for all ages.
Good morning. I'm going to take this off, actually. I'm far enough away from you, and then you can see what I'm saying. I want to wish everybody a happy Hanukkah, for those of you who celebrate. And we're going to do our affirmation. So I'm going to invite the children to come in front of the screen. If you're downstairs in our lower level, I got that Zoom going earlier, so I know you can see me. And then for those of you at home, please come to the screen, and we're going to do our children's affirmation now. So put your U's high up in the sky. We are Unitarian Universalists. We are people with open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. We care for the earth and each other. So today I'm going to read you a story that Sierra Marie left for me to read to you. And it's inspired by and uses some, but not all of the language from another story called Making Good Things Happen. And that was included in the book Hide and Seek with God by Marianne Moore. So begins the story. It had been a hot, dry summer. Drier than usual. It was hard to keep the gardens and the crops growing. Everyone was glad when in late August, it finally started to rain. The children went outside and played in puddles. Adults breathed more deeply, the satisfied kind of breath you might breathe when you've been waiting for something without realizing it. And then it finally happens. The plants thirstily took in all the water they needed. Everyone was happy. It rained for a few days, and they kept saying, "Thank God, we really needed this rain." But it kept raining after that. And by the fourth day, people began saying, "I know we needed the rain, but this is a little much." When county officials had to cancel the carnival because of the rain, the children were very unhappy. They said, "Why does it have to be raining so much? Why won't it stop raining?" The rain began to fill up the rivers so that they were flowing over their banks, and water was coming into the houses of people who lived near the rivers. When they realized that they would have to leave their houses, they looked at one another worried and said, "Where will we go?" People who lived further up from the rivers asked the people from the rivers, "How can we help?" The people from the rivers said, "We need somewhere to go." So the people who lived further from the river made a nice place at the community center for the people from the rivers to come and stay. They cooked their best dishes and they shared them with them and brought games to play as well. But it took longer I'm sorry, I'm losing my spot here. But it took longer for it to stop raining than anyone expected. And the people from the rivers started to worry that they would need more diapers for the babies and more clothing and more things to do. "This is too hard," they cried out. "When, oh, when will we get some relief?" Relief soon came from the people who lived nearby the community center, who brought over more diapers and more clothing and things to do. They brought more food and water to drink. They led a story hour for the children so the adults from the river could sort out what to do next. When the rains finally stopped and the roads began to dry out, it was time for the people from the river to go and clean up their flooded homes. They felt overwhelmed and alone in their work, but they weren't alone for long. People from all over the county came and said, "How can we help?" Some people even came from a couple of counties over. It was a lot of work, but they got the work done together. The people from the rivers were relieved they didn't have to do it all by themselves. They said, "We're lucky to live in such a caring community. Thank God for good people who lend help when it's needed." Indeed, we give thanks to people who pay attention to what is needed and who share what they can. May we be people such as this. And so ends our story. Oh, almost forgot. I'm inviting Nancy up now so she can light our menorah.
Good morning. Last Sunday we lit the first candle of Hanukkah. So today we're going to light all 8. Not a good beginning. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu להדליק נר של חנוכה. אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שעשה ניסים לאבותינו הימים ההם. הזמן הזה. Amen.
Now is the time in our service where we share with each other. The holidays are a time of great joy. I'm shortly going to go down south and see my family, and I'm very excited about that. And so it brings a lot of good things into our life. It can also be a time of stress and a sad time for some people. So now is the time for us to share our joys and our sorrows. The recording will be stopped during this time so that we can share with each other freely. Well, it does not want to light, which makes me very sad. I'm going to try one more time here. It feels important today for some reason. And ask that we hold these together in thoughtful meditation or prayer, and then Jerry will lead us in Spirit of Life.
Our reading this morning is entitled "The Word That Is a Prayer" by Ellery Akers. One thing you know when you say it, all over the earth, people are saying it with you. The child blurting it out as the seizures take her. A woman reciting it on a cot in a hospital. What if you take a cab through the Tenderloin as a streetlight? A man in a wool cap, yarn unraveling across his face, knocks at the window. He says, "Please." By the time you hear what he's saying, the light changes, the cab pulls away, and you don't go back, though you know someone just prayed to you the way you pray. Please, a word so short it could get lost in the air as it floats up to God like the feather it is, knocking and knocking, and finally falling back to earth as rain, as pellets of ice, soaking in a black branch, collecting in drains, leaching into the ground, and you walk in that weather every day.
Now is the time for our offering. For those of you at home, you may give via the QR code or the Simple Give app. For those of you here in the room, members and friends, we have a jar that will be held by one of our greeters as you exit. If you are new with us today, your presence here today is your gift to us, and there is no more that needs to be given. We're very happy that you've joined us. And now, Nancy, first let's do our congregational response, and then Nancy will play our offertory for us. In the spirit of compassion and service, we dedicate these, our offerings.
One thing you know when you say it, all over the earth, people are saying it with you. A child blurting it out as the seizures take her, a woman reciting it on a cot in a hospital. Ellery Akers captures it, doesn't she? Please. It is a simple prayer that escapes our lips in desperation, in fear, in frustration, in a sigh. Does it ever get answered? Does this one word prayer ever get answered? Back in August 2020, at the congregation I serve, I offered a prayer filled with desperate pleading, please, after another. It was a horrendous year filled with hate and cold-hearted actions against one another. I have tried, and perhaps you have tried as well, to block out 2020 and most of 2021 Its trauma has broken our spirits. It was a vain attempt on my part to leave 2020 behind, because the trauma that occurred then is still continuing in this nation and around the world. While we received a brief respite from the pandemic, the global economic impact, the rapidly rising inflation, the disruption of the supply chain, the labor shortages are causing renewed fear and anxiety. The prospect of yet another variant surging around the globe is not what any of us placed on our wish list for Santa. The prayers of please still cry out from the depths of our hearts. We seem to be waking up in a land far from Kansas, and we are not sure if it will be led by a good witch or a bad witch. We want our ruby slippers to go home, please. There is an answer. It may not be the answer that we want to hear. It is within our power to answer the prayers of please. Just as Dorothy had to realize that she had the power to go home all along, we have the power to answer our prayers of please. Just as the child and woman cry please through their physical sufferings, which may stir our hearts to weep and despair, or there is a response of hope to be of service. It need not be complicated or strenuous. To be of service requires that we are attentive to the moment to answer the call in whatever way we are able. For some, it may mean some physical activity, cooking a meal, driving someone to an appointment, walking their dog. For others, it may mean something a bit more unnoticed, like sitting nearby and being a witness to their experience. There may not be anything more that can be done for the woman in a hospital bed other than being present, holding her hand, offering an ice chip to moisten her lips, a cool washcloth to wipe their forehead. Yet, being of service to one another in such a manner can be profoundly transformational for the person receiving this tender care and for the person offering it. But when we answer the cries of please, the response requires coming from pure intentions. Back in the early days of the AIDS pandemic, many grassroots organizations developed programs of AIDS buddies and care partner teams. There was an appeal among folks to be with a person with AIDS, especially at the close of their lives. There was a false spiritual quest that had infiltrated the movement to provide support to people who were near death's door and needed ancillary supports to remain at home. So many hospitals and hospices refused to care for people with AIDS, so the need to assist to keep them at home and comfortable was great. In the agency I served as director, we had many willing volunteers who wanted to be on a care partner team. But then in the early 1990s, new combinations of antivirals came out to hold the virus at bay. And suddenly these individuals who were close to death's door literally threw off their burial clothes and rose from their tombs. These individuals suddenly had different needs than before, and they were no longer the meek, dying, bed-bound person, but someone with a determination to regain their personal power of life. They still needed volunteer support, but they had opinions and a voice in how that support was to be given. And the volunteers ran into resistance, and their spiritual quest to have a brush with death suddenly became a chore. We lost volunteers quickly because the answer to the pleas was no longer on their terms, but the ones on the receiving end. Being of service to another may result in transformative experiences, But if that is the motivation for being of service, then it may not result in the life-changing result desired. We are called to be of service to one another because we are called to answer the prayer to please love one another. That love may be in the form of the Good Samaritan who tends to the stranger's wounds and ensure they have bed and food. Or it may be a gentle word offered at the right time, unbeknownst to the speaker, but known to the hearer of those words. Or it may be in passing legislation that might make it easier for parents to provide shelter and food for their children. To answer the prayer of please does not consider the cost to themselves, but only seeks to be of support to the other, because this is how everyone should be treated. This is what the Christian scriptures call the golden rule: in everything do to others what you would have them do to you. It is in other religions as well. Buddhism, treat not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. Islam, none of you is truly a believer until you love for others what you love for yourself. Native American Lakota Sioux proverb, do not wrong or hate your neighbor, for it is not he who you wrong, but yourself. Taoism, regard your neighbor's gain as your own gain and your neighbor's loss as your own loss. But let us take this to a larger stage. Our individual actions are important, but there are things that many of us have been privileged with that others have not been so privileged. Many live in housing that they can afford. How might we ensure that others are able to live in housing that they can afford? Many have access to food and drink sufficient for their families' needs. How might we ensure that others have food security and clean water? Many have had careers that enabled them to raise families in relative comfort and ease. How might we ensure that today's workers are able to raise families in relative comfort and ease? Many of us have excellent access to healthcare and can afford the medications to keep us well. How might we ensure that others have universal healthcare? Many of us were fortunate to receive an education at the bachelor and graduate levels. How might we ensure that today's students are able to access this education without being forced into a lifetime of imprisoning debt? To answer the prayer of please is broader than the one-on-one moments, and make no mistake, these one-on-one moments are vital to knowing we are loved and have inherent worth and dignity. But we have a greater calling to be of service, and that is uplifting each other to enable our reaching the stars of our potential and giftedness to the world. Don't let anyone tell you that we cannot do these things, or that ensuring the well-being and tranquility of our citizens is somehow anti-American. It is written in our own founding documents as our calling. The child in the throes of a seizure, the woman dying in the hospital bed, the man experiencing homelessness with the raveling yarn cap are praying to us, please.
Thank you, Reverend Fred. It's now time for us to extinguish our chalice, but before I failed to deliver Sierra Marie's milestone, and so I wanted to be sure that you knew that she couldn't be with us today because she lost her mother-in-law, and so please hold her in your thoughts. And now if you could join me as we say our shared declaration and extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. And now if you will join us in our closing hymn, number 159. Thank you. Number 159.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and wide. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, moreover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
As you enter this next week, be mindful of the prayers being prayed around you. There may be opportunities for you to share some of the warmth of community you experience here. And now, allow the carol of the bells hold you in the peace and joy of the season before our time of fellowship.